What's up, you guys? FL Studio 21 is out, and that means there is a lot of new features that can help increase your workflow, and we're going to go through them all in depth. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Please like and subscribe, and let's get started. So first things first, we will create an automation clip. If we open this up, we can now convert our automation to event data, which will go into our events editor. We can now draw this in, cross over and merge two different automation clips, and it'll do its best to combine these together and kind of meet in the middle. And we can choose how many points we want and how fine we want or sensitive we want it by changing this knob here. And if we accept, we'll get one put together clip. And just as quick, we'll go over the playlist. First things first, which is great, is our view automatically changes as we're transposing notes up or down, which it did not used to do in FL Studio 20. There's also increased precision when doing any kind of editing with the scroll wheel. For example, changing velocity, which my scroll wheel is actually pretty busted, so too bad for me, but great for you. Then whichever channel here we have selected, that is actually going to open up when double-clicking on an empty pattern clip. So if I click the 21 test, insert 2, and double-click this, that is exactly what will open. Or if I click addictive keys and double-click, the addictive keys will open in a piano roll. Something else that's worth mentioning, which is absolutely awesome, is our type to piano roll. We can actually change the octave by doing Alt and one of the numbers on the number pad. Which, if you ask me, is absolutely amazing. And moving from the piano roll, let's move into the playlist. So first things first is dropping samples on or cloning a track. We'll highlight it, which does not happen in FL Studio 20. Another new feature is when deleting multiple, we're going to get a warning box here that tells you exactly what you're deleting. That way you have to actually look and confirm. And if we now create time markers, we used to have a punch in, punch out option down here on the bottom. This has been renamed to start recording and stop recording for our punch in, punch out. We also have 3 new features everybody keeps talking about, and it's worth it. We have this gain option where we can actually change the gain in playlist, which is awesome for kind of matching the size of waveforms and evening out audio better. Turn that up there. And we also have a crossfade option. As you can see, this is creating an automatic crossfade and a fade in or fade out. And the cool thing is this is completely independent. Even though these aren't made unique, the fade ins, outs, and crossfades are going to be unique to each of these separately. You can also see, as I drag this, we got this volume difference. Now, if we right click here, we can change this so that it doesn't show the gain preview. So as you will see, if I separate these to make it a little less obvious, when we watch this here, when I check or uncheck that, you'll see this waveform gets bigger, or it goes away, gets replaced with a number for the actual gain increase. We can also show fade previews. When I check that, you'll see this gain difference at the beginning is gone. When I turn it back on, you'll see that the preview is there. Now, with these separated, if we take a look, if we click Show Fade Editing and we actually turn this off altogether, you'll notice we don't have the fades in the corner, nor do we have our actual decibel changes here. We want to turn that back on. Shift F is actually the shortcut for turning this on and off. We also, if we turn off our Show Fade and Show Gain previews, we can click Alt to show those. Just by holding Alt, we get a preview. We have snap fade handles, which is going to snap this to grid. And like many things, if we hold Alt, it's going to let us come off of grid. When I let go of Alt, back on grid. Vice versa, if it's not set to a grid, holding Alt will snap it to a grid. So that's how you can alternate through the two. Now, create new clips with manual fades. It says that new audio clips are created with manual fades. That's what the FL Studio user manual says. In practice, so far, I haven't noticed a difference or what this does. So if you know, please let us know below. Now, we can add new tracks with this add button, which is pretty cool. You can see I have a new instrument track just by choosing add. I can also add an audio track, which has synced to this with a track in the mixer, just like clicking right, going track mode, audio, and choosing a mixer track. Or for the instrument, going track mode and choosing an instrument track. Same thing, but just a nice, quick, easy add button up here at the top. Something else to note, if you'll notice, this section for massive went right where our playhead was. So pasting now, whenever it's applicable, or adding anything whenever it's applicable, it will be added at the playhead. Just like that. Same thing if we copy something, Control-C, Control-V, it's going to paste it at the playhead. Now, if the playhead is out of view, it will do it, let's put it over here, like FL Studio used to, where it'll paste it just kind of somewhere close. However, when the playhead is in view, it will paste at the playhead. Something else cool when selecting multiple items to bring into the playlist, if I select these and drag them in, they would usually fall downwards like we're seeing here. However, if we hold Shift, it'll actually drop them all in one line going from left to right. Now, this can also be done with a new feature for making multiple selections within the browser. And you can do this by clicking an option, holding Shift, clicking, and dragging it over. And again, if we hit Shift, when we drag it in, all in one line left to right. Something else very cool we have is if we select all of these, they actually all now support this chop option. So I can chop it into 1/8 beats, and you'll see it does it for all of them. While in FL Studio 20, it would only do it for one in particular. This is great because we can also now chop, wait for it, automation. So if you have an automation clip that is automating with something specifically, we can now take both of these, chop them, and edit them together. Now, just like we can chop automation up, we can also do something new and cool now, which is we can go ahead and merge automation. And when we do so, it's going to do its best to combine all of the different parts together with a sensitivity option that changes the resolution. So as you see, we have a curve here. That's maxed out. It's a point. Now, in our select, we also have a select overlapping clips option, which is working for me in the beta, but is not working for me right now. And in the playlist, you'll see it as a select overlapping notes. And as you can see, it selected, well, the overlapping notes. And so it's going to select the ones after rather than the ones before. Select overlapping notes, because the ones after are technically on top, or technically the ones overlapping the ones before. And the last option is how our audio actually adjusts once it's been recorded in the playlist. And it is actually a mixer option. We have adjust position of recorded audio, which used to be called compensate for master latency. And while it's mentionable for the playlist, because it does change how your audio shifts and sits within the playlist after being recorded, that is in our next topic, which is the FL Studio mixer. Now, we got our mixer open here. Not an actual option, but something to note is that mixer processing has been improved. So that means less CPU usage when processing stuff within your mixer. Now, an option we didn't have before that we now have in FL Studio 21 is we can actually Control-A and select all the tracks, which is amazing for if we want to do something like route all the tracks to one submix or an auxiliary track or anything like that. In FL Studio 20, if you wanted to do that, you'd have to click Control and drag all the way to the end of the mixer panel. And this is awesome because we also have a few more features that are supported with multiple selections. So if I go Control-A, for example, and I turn on and off the enable effects slot, this is a good way to go from having your entire track wet to your entire track dry in the single click of a button. We can also now, in the way we can come and render an ARM track by doing Alt-R, we can also select and render multiple tracks of our choice by doing render selected tracks. which gives us the same exact result without having to click ARM, but just by selecting multiple tracks, which you can do by doing Control-Shift, or we can do Control-Drag, or Control-A. Now, something else different, if we went to FL Studio 20 and we right-click, track mode, and we go Instrument Track, for example, you'll see that it popped up the mixer here in the background. In FL21, if I were to create an instrument track, you'll see that the mixer was not brought up. Now, there's one more option that kind of correlates to the mixer, and that's actually in our audio settings, browser preview, and metronome track here. And I will go over those as we jump into going into all of the settings in FL Studio in depth. First things first is in FL Studio 21, the beta at least, the Control-Z, instead of undoing one or redoing one like it does in FL Studio 20, it would undo everything. And we have that option if we go to General, Alternate Undo Modes. So if it defaulted and you noticed your Control-Z is different, this is where the option is, and that's what it was. File support for Apple M4A audio is now supported, so you can load in files in the M4A file type. The FL Studio splash screen no longer appears when an audio error has happened. That way you can read the error file without the splash screen over the top of it. Now, something else that's minor that you might notice, we go to something like audio settings. You'll see things are stacked over the top of each other a little more, like our sample rate used to be here in the top right corner. We've got a more vertical kind of flow going here, and setting windows now align more vertical so that they can support longer text needed for different languages, which is something awesome that they are doing moving forward. Project General Settings page is where we'll start. They added a copy used samples to the project folder. Now, this is very similar to doing a zipped file export. How you'll have your project and then you'll have the samples used. The difference is this is not zipped. This is just organizing wherever your project folder is, all of your samples within that folder. If you want to know about choosing a data folder for your projects, I go over all of these settings in a video above. You will notice, however, that is in FL Studio 20, and this option here is not included. Something else that will not be included that is new to FL Studio 21 is automatic crossfades. And automatic crossfades automatically creates crossfades between clips in the playlist, as you can see there. We also have a new option in file settings where you can save every 1 minute and before risky operations for your autosave. And this, of course, is for your backup files. Here, we also have a theme option, which everybody's been talking about, where we can switch through different themes, as well as customize our own. If you want to see this more in depth, check out the video above. In our general settings, we'll see a few new options. We have put undone recordings in the recycle bin. If this is off, when you undo a recording, it's gone forever. Can't bring it back. When this is on, you can redo, and when you do the redo command, it brings back your audio. It's awesome. We have invert pencil buttons. This makes it so that if you're using pencil, it swaps the secondary button with the primary button for the pencil. And then we also have down here something different with an old option. So we can set this to open last used project, right? Now, when this is set to use last used project, if when it goes to load, the FL Studio crashes, it'll then change and default to opening the default template. And the reason for this is because if you go to load your last project and it crashes, and then you go to open FL Studio again, and it's set to load the same crashing project, you kind of got this loop going on that becomes a little bit harder to escape. And they kind of took care of that for us. And so it is now set that if it crashes once, it doesn't try again. It's just going to open the default. Now in our audio settings, we have something cool. We've got our browser preview track and metronome track, and these are separate. And this is mixer channels you can send it to. So you can send your metronome to channel 3, and you can send your previews from everything in the browser to channel 2, for example. Whereas in FL Studio 20, it was just one option called Preview Mixer Track that would handle both the metronome and preview options from the browser. Next thing, if we went to File Export, we're going to save this here. If I click Show Files when completed and I start, When it's done, it'll show me the file and have it highlighted and ready for me to go. It's highlighted and selected. Whereas FL Studio 20, if I were to export, it did not select it for us, only showed in folder. So that's new. FL Studio 21 will now select the file after exportation. Another cool and huge option that was added to the settings for FL Studio is our ability to right-click a channel and patcherize it. So now you can take any plugin that you have or audio that you have going in a channel in the channel rack and throw it right into a patcher instance with the single click of a button, which is pretty stinking cool. And last but not least, something interesting and cool. We go View and we open our touch controller. This actually shows things and the notes they're playing on. So I go to All and I go to Addictive Keys. You can see we now get the playback colors on this, which we did not get before. And speaking of mentionable changes and settings, the browser has plenty. So let's take a look at the browser. First things first, if we go up here to Tools, we have the browser find option. It's kind of a rebrand from FL Studio 20, where it is browser smart find. Now in FL Studio 20, there was a strict find, a smart find, and a folder search. And all of that has been jam-packed into this bottom section down here. If you want to do a strict find, you put something in quotations and it'll search exactly that. If you want to do a smart find, you can just type in what you're searching for. And if you want to search within a folder, you can click Search in Selected Folder. So let me remove this. I will choose a folder and I can search within that folder by highlighting this option here. And as you can see, there's nothing in the folder, but outside the folder, plenty. Now, the really cool thing here is I'll go to Drums, search clap. We have this tags option. This tags option is actually really sweet. So we have a few different options here. We have a type option. So I can say, I just want to see samples with the word clap, okay? Or we can search MIDI. We can also search presets. We can search project templates. So let me get rid of MIDI and I'll search for one of my templates, YouTube template. We've also got scores. Scores is going to be the same thing as MIDI, except it's a .fsc instead of a .mid. Any of these that we click, we'll get a visual representation of them below, which is pretty cool. We can also search for images and envelopes, especially if you're someone who likes to export project bones and keep them to search through later. This is really cool for sorting through the different things that you have saved in different locations throughout your browser. We can also, if I go clap, samples, favorite, different samples. And what this is going to do is I can actually choose the star here, which is our favorites, and it'll only return to me anything that I have favorited. So I can search clap favorites. We have other filters here as well, and we can actually right click and add a tag. So if I wanted this to be clap, I can click enter, and now we have this clap option. If I edit tags, you'll see the star plus clap, and it's just separated by a comma. So if I really wanted to, I could do comma VST, comma plugin. And now this is part of VST and plugin, as well as clap and favorite. And if we edit tags, you'll just see everything comma separated. I can remove the tags with my edit. And when you add tags, it'll just add a comma to the end of whatever tags are already there. And then you can add as many as you want. Now, our difference between any and all is if you'll notice, I only set one clap to actually have the clap filter. If I click any, it'll bring back anything that has one of these tags. If I have all, it has to bring back only stuff that has all of these tags. So this is something to be wary of that you can switch back and forth when searching. You can now select multiple samples in the browser by clicking Shift and going to where you want to go to select everything, or hitting Control and clicking to add individuals. Now, if I go to a longer option here, you can see we get this live playback. Now, I can left click this, which plays it from the beginning, or I can right click it and tell it to play from somewhere specifically. You can also do this by shift clicking. We also have a global sample preview volume. And when we change this, even as we switch, it'll stay, which is awesome because if you're gain staging your projects and you're at -18 decibels about an average for your project, and you have someone who you got samples from and they have everything with no headroom, it's just as close to zero as possible. Previewing samples like that is just lame. So now you can actually turn this down so you can avoid blowing your ears out while previewing samples if your whole project is gain staged at a lower volume, which is awesome. We can also see the sample rate that the sample in question is at. So we got this one at 44.1, and it'll tell you, is it 32-bit or 16, as well as if it's stereo or mono. So this information becomes a lot more in-depth and intuitive as you're working within FL Studio's new browser, which is awesome. Now, something else cool about here is if you have slices saved in a WAV file, or you have loop points, you will actually see those in this preview box here. Now, if we click this drop down, we have 4 new options here, which are new options for search. We can check show parent folders and search results, which is going to show all of the parent folders for all the audio we find back in the searches. We can put the search box on top instead of having it on bottom. And then we have type to filter, which is supposed to start filtering as you type, but honestly, with that on and off, I don't really notice much of a difference when I'm typing and filters are coming back. And then we also have enable indexing. And when enable indexing is off, it's going to limit your search to the folder that you are in. When it is on, it also builds an index to make future searches quicker so that I can pull and reference things at a quicker pace rather than having to search. So as it searches, it builds that index for your search terms. So cool option to keep on. Now, if we go back to our samples, if we right click, we have a couple new options here that weren't in FL Studio 20, and that is the open parent folder and locate file. Open parent folder is going to open the folder that the file is in Windows or whatever operating system you're using. And locate file will actually select that specific file in that folder when that folder is opened. So open parent folder, not selected, locate, and it's selected. If we look at our tabs at the top here, we have some new tab options. I can right click these and you will see we get a drop down, which you could not right click them in FL Studio 20. We have rename, color, and icon, which is cool. We can change the color, rename it, make it stand out, make it whatever we want it to be. Okay, we can clone a tab. We can zoom, which is going to change the size. And these are all independent of each other. So as I switch through, you'll notice the zoom is different, which is super awesome. If we actually right click one of these other ones, we'll notice a hide option. This actually is not available on the all, but that'll hide this tab specifically. We can right click, go to show hidden, and we can go show all the hidden tabs, and that brought it back. Let me clone a tab really quick now that we have it cloned. If I right click, we can delete. We see a delete option. We also have a move left and move right option, which we can do with any of these after we have clicked and selected it, of course, besides the all tab. We have show only one folder content, and that's going to make it so that only one folder can be open at a time. So when I open another one, it closes the old one. If you don't want that, make sure it's off. And now, as you can see, we can open as many folders as we want. We have show folder icons. If I turn that off, you'll see it's just the words. Show images, which shows the plugin database plugin icons, as we'll see here. If I turn that off, no images. If I turn it on, these images come back. And we also have show preview. If I come back and I search for clap, and I click it, if I take that away, we no longer get that preview window right here. We also have file extensions. That'll tell you if it's a .wav, .whatever. See, .wav on these ones. Show unknown file types, which will show things that FL Studio doesn't recognize. We also have remember tab size, which honestly, I'm not 100% sure what this even does. We have the frozen option, and is supposed to affect something from change. So if we switch back, you can see I can do all this changing. And if I come back, it's going to be exactly what it was because I froze it as such. Now that I undid the frozen, I'm going to go ahead and open it up like this. Now let's freeze it. Now when I come back, it'll be like this. And so that's a really cool way for you to set one of these up to be something you want. For example, like all claps or drum kit sounds, have your drum folders open, right click, freeze it every time you go to it. That's how it'll be open. Now, our sort by will sort the files by either their name, the type, so like, is it a wave, MIDI, things like that, or the date. And then we have this group option, which is quite confusing in the way it's described in the FL Studio user manual. Basically, it means it's going to sort things the way that they told FL Studio to sort it. I would leave this on instead of having it off. And if you want, you can turn it off, play with it, but I don't have a good explanation for you. We also have view layout options. Standard is going to be in line like this, our usual. You can also change it to tree, which means any folder that's open, we're going to see the samples on the right side. So folders on the left, samples on the right with a little separator here. We also can go view samples. And that's going to do the same thing, but now we're going to get these sample previews of the waveforms, which is pretty cool if you ask me. And now that we're done with the tab options, I want to introduce you to a special tab that is actually really cool, and that is the library tab. So the library tab is going to give you the FL Studio library of samples and products you can use with these different plugins. You can switch to each plugin and you get a list here. And it lets you preview these live in FL Studio without having to actually leave FL Studio to go check it out or purchase it or download. And so this includes free and paid content and will automatically be added to the associated plugin. And just as the old browser has become new, next we'll look at old plugins and what's new with old plugins. First things first, we have a change with Vintage Chorus, where any options that we right click or we go to set or type in a value are going to have more detail. You see here we have a milliseconds option. That's because we're setting a time in milliseconds. In Maximus, our grid lines here in the back and our envelope lines are actually brighter and easier to see. This is actually something that's harder to see unless these are sitting directly side by side. Very minor change, but the change is still there. Flex presets can now be undone with Control Z. So if I like what I have and I ended up changing it to a different preset, I can always Control Z to go back, which in FL Studio 20 is not an option. Next thing we have, which is a very interesting option, if I open up an effect here and I click our icon, come to the back, and I go to troubleshooting, there is an allow FL Studio to undo when Control Z is pressed. This option that we have now, when it's off, while I'm in the plugin, I can't undo changes in FL Studio. I'll click Control Z, nothing is happening. However, when I turn that back on, Control Z now undid my volume change. What is also new with Patcher is if you'll see here, I have a 3x oscillator in here. We couldn't do that before. So 3x os, DX10, and the fruitcake can all now be used within Patcher, which is awesome. And there's also this cool new VFX sequencer that can be used within Patcher. Next, we have Edison. Now in Edison, there is now multiple selections to envelopes. So I can set multiple points in here. And if I click Control and drag, I can now select multiple points, which we were not able to do in FL Studio 20. There is also notes that the scripts for Edison are now hard-coded. Coders will understand this more than I do, but the idea of hard coding, from my understanding, is that the values in the code and the code itself is less flexible and more defined. And I could see that helping with compatibility between platforms, but I honestly don't really know. So if you're a coder out there, let us know down below because I'm pretty interested. And I hope that's something that when you hear about it, you're like, wow, that's cool. Now, for our audio editors like Edison, and this is going to include SliceX and the Fruity Convolver, scripts have now been changed to Python instead of using the PAX compiler. That to Python, which is more universal, which means hooray for Mac users. Scripts are now compatible with Mac, and you can write your own scripts for use on Macintosh. Fruity Convolver, for our impulse response here, used to have a maximum length of 1 minute. That 1 minute maximum length has now been increased, which is awesome. So you can now have extremely long impulse responses if you want. Something really cool that's now in FL Studio is there is new operators we can put in here, like a new Fmod operator and a few other options. I'm not going to explain to you how those work because I'm not entirely sure. I played with them a little bit, but I'll include a list below of all the different options, as well as every single option that's actually available. Crossfade has a new juggling science preset, and this preset is supposed to be really good for electronic music, for like chopping and glitching, something you could probably use really fun with a synth. We also have new options for sound font player. If we click the bottom down here, we have program modes, which determines how patches are triggered. Automatic is default. Instrument is note on until note off. So if you play a note or hold a note, it waits until I let go. And drum plays the full sample, ignoring the note off and just going beginning to end. And last but not least, we have the Z-Game Editor Visualizer. Now, I don't really ever use this, so I'm probably going to butcher a bunch of this stuff. But the first thing to see that's really cool, let's open a preset so we can tell. Got this cool looking preset going here, right? I can actually show any transparency. This one's not going to show it. Let's do something simple. Let's do goop. So you can see the green goop flying with the transparency there. So you know if we put this over something that we'd be able to see the object behind. So to buffer, if you'll see, it's not on here, but it's on back here. And what toBuffer does is if I click toBuffer on this, for example, it takes this and everything behind it and turns it into one loadable image. And then I can go forward and I can actually recall that image later up here. Let's go here and just change this to image effects and we'll go image. Now, as you can see, I can come here and I can choose one of our outputs that are set to buffer. And in here, we can actually look at those layers specifically. So to show it simply, I'll go to buffer here. Now we have this image. Now I can go ahead and insert a layer before. And so now D is before C. This is the new one I added. Image, output from layer B. Now we have the same thing. But I can see the difference between the final output and the one set to buffer. Something else new and cool we have is our little surface tab here, which is like Patcher, where we can actually build our own little graphics user interface and save that as a preset to modulate and use for our Z-Game Editor Visualizer. Z-Game also includes one more new effect. If you want to go find it, it's called Dub Switcher Alpha Key right here. And HUD text can now find fonts outside of the font folders. You can find the font folder buried pretty deep. It's in your program files for ImageLine with your FL Studio version, and then going into your plugins, finding Z-Game, and in Z-Game, it has effects where you'll go to the HUD effects for those fonts. And here is your fonts folder. And you can add more fonts in here, but supposedly this is now able to find fonts that are not in the fonts folder. I am assuming, however, they probably need to be in the HUD folder. There was other things added to Z-Game Editor. However, I could not proof of concept the changes and the notes that were made. So for now, that just about covers it. Now, for the fun part, the new plugins. First things first, we have Luxeverb. Luxeverb is going to have an input option. This is actually going to be how much is input into the effect. And this does not affect your dry. So if I play this, You can see that. I also don't have any wet though, because I have no input coming in to the effect. Really cool for adding throws and things like that. There's lots of creative options here. We have brightness for a brighter reverb, room size, diffusion, the standard stuff, character, which affects the tail, and our modulation for that character. We have pre-delay with a time option for syncing. Awesome, cool plugin. We have a whole feedback section, and we can also add a resonance with our peak gain here, or even cut if we wanted to, on our output signal. On the bottom, we have an envelope option. What to note about this envelope option is our threshold option here is going to affect the way this scales either positively or negatively, depending on which way we turn this, and it'll automate that to do it. Let's turn down our wet. You can hear it automating. We also have a sidechain option here. And if you do route for sidechain, you will have that option here. Now, before we move on, I do have an in-depth on every single one of these buttons. If you want to see that, click above. Next, we have the vintage phaser. Our maximum minimum is going to be the minimum maximum. You can kind of imagine that our LFO for our phasing is going to go between these 2 points here. You can see them represented in frequencies at the top left too to give you a better idea. We can also go to manual where we can manually move it. So if we listen, we will now be controlling the phasing instead of letting the LFO do it over here, this modulation. And this modulation is going to be the character or the LFO that is running the phasing. On our phasing here, we also have feedback. The higher the feedback, the more, of course, that feeds back into the phaser, helping to add character. We can time sync our LFO here by clicking tempo sync. Our tension, if you pay attention here, this is our modulation type. We have triangle and sine. Our tension is going to change the curvature of our LFO. Over here, we can turn on a delay, and this is just going to be like a standard delay. It's just built into the effect. Really cool if you play with it. High pass, low pass, stereo separation, either left or right, a mix knob, feedback, all the good stuff. And then we also have noise that can be added to our signal. Next, we have the multiband delay. Now, the multiband delay is going to delay each and every single one of these little frequency ranges. You can see the frequencies marked off here by wherever this blue line is. So this one right here would be 600 milliseconds. Now, to actually hear this delay, you have to turn this one way or the other. And this is your delay scale. So if we go left, it's actually going to delay us behind. And if we go like this, it'll delay after. We've got cool options here for harmonics, a smoothing option for when we're switching between things that are not alike. And this would be good for using for switching between banks, which one of the things I think is the coolest is if we draw something in here, go and draw something in here, click this drop down. I clicked interpolate 1 to 8. Now, as we go, this switches between the two. And instead of having to switch banks, you can just morph. And the smoothing affects the way that morphs. We can draw with different options here. Cool effect. Next option we'd have to open an instant of Patcher. Let's go ahead and add a plugin. We will add the 3x oscillator, which we used to not be able to add, but FL Studio 21 made it possible. So there's that. Don't know why my patcher is so small, but whatever. So weird. I'll figure that out later. Anyways, now that we have that, let's go ahead, move that over and add VFX Sequencer. We'll unhook that. We'll hook this up, open up this bad boy. And now when we play notes, it's going to follow the sequencer here. Now this has multiple different views, which you can click across here. So going over this really quickly, we've got a randomize option. We can see all the different presets there and scroll through them one by one. We have the section we're in now, which is Note Select, which chooses all of these individuals. Scale root N1 through N5. I honestly don't 100% know exactly what those are or what they do. We have velocity options for each. We have octaves, so we can set them in different octaves. We can also do multiple octaves at once, although I don't 100% know how to do that. We have gate time, which as you move this up, it makes it a longer gate. As you move it down, it makes it a shorter gate. We have step type, which gives us chords and rests and other options. We also have scale step. I'm going to assume since there's 12 of these, they are semitones, and we could probably climb. Yep. As you can probably tell from the way this explanation was put together, I haven't really used this, and so therefore I do apologize. There is no in-depth video on this cool effect we have here. In the event that I do make one, I will add that here in this video. And there you have it. We just did in-depth for FL Studio 21 and everything updated to it. It was a lot to cover, so if you want to go back, you can check the timestamps to make it easier. I really hope this video was helpful. If you have any comments, please comment. If you like the video, please like the video. I always appreciate a subscribe. It's Warren with Scale Audio, and adios.